Hello students, Mr. Young here with Chapter 19, Lesson 2. Today's lesson is about cowboys. Oh yeah! Me and Doc Holliday are in the business of slinging lead, and business is good. Bang, 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 bang. Okay, so full disclosure, it could get pretty exciting in the West, and herding cattle doesn't seem that exciting, but herding cattle is what cowboys really did. That's why they're called cowboys. And it could still be dangerous work. Well, we'll learn all about it today. Okay, so crazy story. When the Spanish originally inhabited Texas, way back in the 1500s, they brought some cows. Like to eat. So some cows escaped and managed to survive in the wild, and they became the sturdy breed of bovine known as the Longhorn. There he is, the majestic Longhorn. So by the 1800s, there were thousands of Longhorns out in Texas just chilling, doing cow things like playing poker and catching some rays. Um, maybe they weren't playing poker. Texas was open range, so that means there's no fences. It's just big open fields everywhere. And so the Longhorns could just wander free. That is until some Texans saw those Longhorns and thought, I could round those up and sell them. So in terms of the cattle business, a Longhorn wasn't worth much in Texas, maybe $3 or $4 a head. But if you could get that Longhorn to a city in the north or east coast, it was worth $40 a head. Thus began the long drive. You see, there are no railheads in Texas, no railroads ran into Texas, so cowboys would drive the cattle, basically herd them, and guide them for months to a place that did have a railhead, originally Missouri. There they would be loaded onto trains and sent to the city for processing and consumption. Most drives started in spring, so there'd be enough grass around for the cows to eat along the way. And at the end of the trails, you had cow towns where the cattle were sold and then all placed on the trains and shipped off to the cities. All right, so the Spanish had known the most about cattle driving and taught what they knew to the other cowboys. A Hispanic cowboy was known as a vaquero. Many cowhands were Civil War veterans, African Americans, and even Native Americans. The long drive was long, hard work. They would drive the cattle all day through any weather, rain or shine. Dangers included bad weather, stampedes if the cattle were startled, and even cattle rustlers, which of course are cattle thieves. Back in the Wild West, cattle rustling was punishable by death. Never steal a man's cow. Alright, many ranchers made a lot of money selling cattle in the cities, but in the late 1880s, the cattle kingdom, as it was known, suddenly died. The land was overgrazed, too many cows munching on the grass, and the supply of cows became too high. We remember supply, demand. The supply of cows was up, but the demand was the same, so the price of the cows goes down. And while the cattle industry survives to this day, it just changed a lot after the cattle kingdom was killed. Another big problem was people started fencing in their land. So if you be like trying to move your cattle herd through a bunch of fenced in yards, you just can't do it. Alright, so that's sort of subject one of the day. Subject two is the Great Plains farmers. So initially, the plains were thought to be an unfarmable desert. However, there were a few factors in the 1880s that changed that. Railroads made it easier and cheaper to get to the Great Plains. New farming technology like the steel plow made land once thought too hard farmable. I think perhaps the biggest factor was that the new laws made some land free. People love free stuff no matter what it is. Like condescending Wonka loves free t-shirts. So in 1862, Congress encouraged folk to settle the plains by passing the Homestead Act. Basically, you paid a $10 registration fee, and you could get up to 160 acres of free land as long as you promised to live there for 5 years. Basically, they wanted people to cultivate the Great Plains. And of course, if you bought it, you were going to live there. These plots were given all over the plains, quite a bit of the Midwest. I am personally holding out for a Homestead Act for when the Fed wants us to colonize Mars, because 160 free acres sounds pretty sweet. Okay, so a homestead is a place you live to earn ownership. So like the Homestead Act, you had to live there for 5 years, so you lived there, that was your homestead. Now thousands moved into the plains, from widows to farmers to African Americans. There was once that, because it was a sweet deal, legal immigrants even got into the action. I believe it mentions that Scandinavians moved quite a bit into the Dakotas, still have heavy influence there today. Now, some folk weren't homesteaders, but purchased their land outright. Land was pretty cheap. I mean, so cheap they're giving it away. Anyone that owned the land, like railroad companies or land speculators, wanted people to live on it. Otherwise, it was kind of barren desert. So they sold it cheap to get people to move there. As a result, many folks bought it up. Free stuff is great, but so is a great deal. Now, Mr. Young Life Lesson, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You've got 100 acres of land, dirt cheap in Nowheresville, Colorado. Now you live in a dirt house and have to farm sod. So farming on the plains was possible, but it wouldn't be easy. There were little to no trees on the plains, so you had to build your house out of the sod. Sod is that top layer of dirt in your yard, like when you dig up the top layer and the grass is holding all the dirt together. That's sod. So in your yard, it's not very thick. It's like that thick, a few inches thick. But in the Great Plains, where the grass just grew and grew and grew for thousands of years, the sod was very thick. Thick enough to make bricks out of that you could make into your home. So you had that. You had to cut through that to farm to get to the nice dirt underneath. The weather didn't always cooperate either. It was either raining too much and you were flooding, or raining not enough and you had a drought. Don't forget the summer locusts. You had swarms of locusts. And in the winter, snow. So much snow. Keeping the homestead was a full-time job for everyone, even the children who mostly didn't have time for things like school. Now, into new farming methods, the farmers of the plains were called sod busters because they had to bust through that sod to get to the nice dirt underneath. They pioneered new ways to farm in the somewhat hostile climate of the plains. They practiced dry farming, which is basically farming without irrigation ditches. They dug deep wells to pull water from the ground and plowed the land after every rain in order to retain that moisture. They also grew special crops like winter wheat, that was basically crops that grew in conditions like that of the plains. Now, despite all these things that they did to try to make it profitable, a lot of farmers didn't do well in the Great Plains. They like 160 acres sounds like a lot, but to really apparently be successful, they needed closer to 300 acres. So a lot of farmers were forced to sell their land and then rent land. It seemed like you only really did well in the plains if you had 300 acres and maybe some nice machinery to help. All right, finishing up the Oklahoma land rush. So by the 1880s, there was only one chunk of land left that was not open to settlement, and that was basically an Indian reservation in Oklahoma. But this reservation in particular was not assigned to any natives, so after years of pressure, the government finally opened it up to settlers. On April 22nd, 1889, people literally lined up at the border of this territory to rush across when there was a pistol shot so they could go stake claims of land. The problem was, folk had already snuck in before that April 22nd date and taken much of the best land. These cheater pumpkin eaters were called Sooners. Alright, hey, that's your content for today. Your assignment, a little writing assignment. Hey, complete sentences please. What were 3 problems faced by settlers on the Great Plains? Any 3 problems? Just say, there were money problems on the Great Plains. One of them was this. Another problem was this. A third problem was this. Boom, 10 points. Alright, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good one, alright?